On account of this is 10 o'clock and it's Lancaster Woodturners Coffee Hour number 89, and this is February 10th, 2022. And I'm seeing 33 live screens right now, and a very good looking bunch of men and ladies. We have two special events coming up. I need to tell you about those. Next week we'll have a special guest on this call with Steve Lohr. And some of you don't know Steve, but he's been an educator and an innovator in wood turning for very many years. He taught at Rochester for many years, and he started the turning and furniture program at Indiana U of PA. And he's now retired and living in Michigan. But he has an amazing body of work, and he's going to do us a slideshow and answer questions and discuss working in series, working in color, working as an artist, and working as a what's your shop like. So he'll be on next week, like the other artist slideshows we've had. And then in a month, on March the 17th, we're not going to have a morning coffee hour. We're going to have an evening cocktail hour at 6 o'clock. And the reason for that is Richard Raffin has agreed to come on, show us slides, be interviewed, show us his current shop, and talk to us and answer questions. But he's in Australia, and he's a morning guy, and so he's agreed if we can get him on during his morning, then he'll be delighted to give us an hour and share a bit of his life with us. So that's what we're going to do on the 17th of March, is have cocktail hour. 6 o'clock our time will be 8 hours earlier, 10 a.m. his time. And that'll be easy, comfortable for him, and it'll allow some of our guys who ordinarily are still at work when we're here to join us that day. So if you'll mark your calendars for March 17th, it's going to be cocktail hour instead of coffee hour. The other announcement I would make is I have asked our good friend and screen mate here, Jim Bowman, who is a retired video editor, to join me in helping manage the call. As we've gained more screens, and I now see 41 on screen, I need to focus on who's waving their hand and trying to talk, and I lose track of who's already got a screen share going or who's been spotlighted and the spotlight hasn't been taken off. And then alert people like Bowman have had to say, hey, please remove the spotlight or do this or that. So I've asked Bowman to take that job on. So we're going to try that today, and that means there may be some hesitations in spotlighting people. For example, he should have spotlighted me since I'm talking. And I'm not going to do any spotlighting. I'm going to leave it all to Bowman. See if you can spotlight me, Jim. And I have muted you all, so muting yourselves isn't going to... you have to unmute yourself if you want to talk. There you go. And now let's see.
You are spotlighted, John.
I am now. I could have been spotlighted if you were on speaker view, but I'm going to be on gallery view. Now I'm back to gallery view. Try and spotlight me again. Or remove spotlight and do it again. We're going to have to practice this a little bit.
You're still spotlight.
I didn't do it. Yeah, I know. I was trying to unmute myself so I could actually talk, believe that or not. I removed it.
Okay, now you guys, I'm seeing gallery view, but if you're on speaker view, you'll see me talk.
Yeah, the only liability is that when we are not on spotlight, anybody that coughs or sneezes or talks to their wife or listens to their phone becomes speaker, and that's not what we want, right, John? So
that's why you go to gallery view instead of speaker view. That's why I'm on gallery view.
Right.
That's why we're trying muting you all at the beginning as well, in order to get the phone calls and crosstalk reduced a bit, so that we can all enjoy the call. And we are taking a few minutes here on this level of housekeeping. I think it'll do us all some good. Okay, now you've spotlighted me, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay, do you want to unspotlight me now?
Probably will take you out of the spotlight.
Okay, I'm still seeing me spotlighted.
You're not spotlighted. Somebody hadn't spoken yet, that's why.
There you go. Okay. So that's what we're going to try today, so I hope you'll all excuse the fumbles and stalls that it'll involve. And likewise, we've been practicing screen shares. I think Don has mastered his screen share, and we'll go to him in a minute. We're going to do a show and tell this morning. If you want to show and tell, use raise hand, please. And that brings you up to the top of the screen. I see Doug, I see Jerry Snelson. We should have Barry. We're going to show your video, so you need to please click yourself up there. Michael Gibson. Now, the thing that happens, of course, is if we're in a discussion and you want to talk, raise hand isn't going to work. So if we're chatting away and somebody wants to, and you want to jump in, you have two options. One is you just jump in, which a lot of us are used to doing, but some of us are too polite to do. The other thing you can do is wave your hand, and it'll be up to Jim and I to spot you and get you on screen and get you unmuted so you can make your contribution to the conversation. So that's how I think it's going to roll. And this is all in aid of trying to continue to be able to have these kinds of meetings as we get a bigger and bigger screen and as we get further onward down this track. Anybody got questions and comments about any of that? I need to make sure that I give everybody a chance to say what they need to say.
John, Doug here. I think I've started doing some consulting work, so my time or my opportunity to attend the morning coffee hour is going to be intermittent these days. Would you mind taking my name off the mail to list if people want to mail photos?
Yes.
For sharing, so that and I appreciate Jim taking over the role I was doing before or trying to do before. So Jim, thanks a lot for stepping up to the plate. It really helps me out too. So
I'll take you off as the picture recipient and I'll put myself on, and then I'll look for someone else to join us in helping manage that.
I didn't realize I could replace you.
Oh, I'm easily replaced. I'm the old finger in the water bucket routine, take your finger out and see how much of a hole you left behind.
Oh, geez. That must be a Canadian thing. So.
Oh, haven't you? I've heard that around the States for 30 years or so at work all the time. Anybody who gets above themselves is reminded to stick their finger in a water bucket and then feel how much they're missed when they pull their finger out.
I remember the tune. We got along without you before we met you. We're going to get along without you now.
Exactly.
Doug, have you got your hand up because you want to show us some work as well?
Yeah, I do have a bunch of urns here, Jim. John, you mentioned about the idea of burial urns, and I had done a bunch of them. So I can share my screen now.
Let's start with you. You share your screen, and Bowman will spotlight you as neato. You don't have to spotlight him if he's sharing screen.
So a number of years ago, a good friend of Jim and I's died, and I made a cherry urn for his ashes for the funeral. This is as far as I know, this is the only urn I've ever made that I actually use.
Now that's a very close copy of an Egyptian Coptic jar, which they used for people's organs after they were dead.
Yeah, it is. Anyway,
did you know that at the time? Were you looking at Coptic urns?
No, I wasn't actually. I was just sort of making an urn that would work. So, anyway, that was the urn, and then and cherry happened to be Roland's favorite wood, so that's what happened. I also made another one here. This is a piece of wood I did with trying to make segmenting with walnut and plywood, in which I did an off-center urn, and I've made a few other ones. This one's a purple heart and walnut or dyed walnut at the top. This one was another piece of cherry where I had a chainsaw cut in the side of it, and rather than throw it out, I highlighted it with putting some epoxy into the chainsaw cut, and that's the last of them.
Doug, how do you know how big they are inside?
I actually I actually measure it by using some glass beads, and I pour the glass beads into the urn and see how many I've got, and that way I can check the volume of it. So, it's just a matter of saying if you want a quart or 2 quarts, put 2 quarts of glass beads and hollow it out until it's full. So, and I've also...
That's interesting, Doug. I usually use rice when I'm trying to figure out the volume for when I'm pouring epoxy, because it's so blooming expensive. You don't want to use any more ounces than you need. But glass beads are interesting.
I usually use water in a measuring cup.
Well, the reason for not using water is it soaks into the edge. So I was just not using that. And the glass beads was like I didn't think of using rice, but they're big enough that they roll in and out quite easily. You know, just any marbles or something like that. And the rule of thumb is always like 1 cubic inch per pound of body weight or something along that line. That was just some urn stuff I've been done in the past. I haven't done it in a while. The problem I had was that I tried to sell them at the funeral homes and stuff like that, and they wouldn't even return my call. It's like, or it wouldn't even whatever. So unless you've got some friend or something that you can get something in there, it's pretty hard to find an outlet for them. And it's not that it's hard to find an outlet for them, and it's that the funeral homes can go in and buy these things up by the dozen made in China, and that's what they tend to do, you know.
Yeah.
Or off of Etsy.
Yeah.
Now, has anybody else got urns they'd like to show today? I realize it's a very personal subject, and I understand if you don't want to show, but if you are willing to, I would sure like to see more urns. I see Michael Brazeau there. Let's go there. What do you got, Michael? Okay.
I mentioned earlier about making the one for my sister, and I made a sketch on 1/4-inch graph paper. Hers is turning out a little different because of the wood that I ended up with. What I did is just did a radius measurement going down from the top to the bottom and set up a spreadsheet, pi r squared, and just used a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch increment, forgetting about rounding effects. If my calculus was better, I would use that, I guess. But anyway, you can come up with an estimate from a sketch, because the shape is pretty easy to sketch out. It's not very, you know, there's not a whole lot of movement to it. It's kind of like whatever. I've been going to write it up, and I just never get around to it. It's going to be curious. I'm going to take the one that I've made. I've got some rye grain I used when seeding a lawn at the cottage that I'm going to use to measure the volume of it. It's going to be way more than she needs, but I'm curious to see how it works out. But there's all kinds of these discussions that go on about the volume. It's an easy way to start with a predetermined, you know, sketch, and then turn. And your wall thickness is going to be, you know, a third, 3/8, half, or whatever, and work it into the equation.
Are you going to give us that math that we can share with the group, Nick?
Yeah, I could. I've got it sketched out. It's just done on a pencil sketch, but yeah, I could do that.
If you get it over to me, I'll put it in the follow-up.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to go back to gallery view here. I don't see any spotlights on. Anybody else? Anything they want to add to the urn discussion or urns they'd like to show? I see Earl Bartel waving his arm. Earl, we're going to go to you now. Jim, I'm going to spotlight him because it's easy for me. I found him.
Yeah, I built a to measure. I go with the rice also, but I took a 12-inch long, 5-inch inside diameter clear plastic. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, the plastic. I just made a piece of MDF and put a groove in it. Stuck a you know, you can get the tape measures that are stick-on, and I put the stick-on measure in there. In the so in a 5-inch diameter, 1 inch high would be 20 pounds approximately of thing. Fill your urn up with the rice, pour it in the measure, measure where the rice comes up to, then I can just pour the rice back into the jar that I keep it in, and that's how that's how I do it. So just it's a little kind of an expensive way. That tube of clear plastic, it's pricey, but you can get it on Amazon. Not a big deal. Thank you.
Have you got any urns to show?
No, I do, but no, not here. They're in the house. They're in the because I do sell at the craft shows and, you know, things like that. And a lot of people, you know, it's legacy urns or keepsake urns, that sort of thing, pets, you know, that kind of thing. So unfortunately, I don't have anything out here in the shop.
Okay. Anybody else with urns? I saw Bert has him beside him up there. We saw his urns last week. Bert, you got more to say about him?
I was just going to make a comment on the measuring. I didn't have to buy the poly tube. I just made one out of plywood and put a groove on one side and slid a piece of Lexan down one side. And so then you fill it up. I use plastic pellets. So you fill it up with plastic pellets, dump it in the measuring thing, and this one here is 275 cubic inches, so pretty hefty person can fit in there.
So you
But
put you
Go
put the
ahead.
volume, you engrave the volume right into the lid, underside of the lid, do you?
Well, I did because I can never remember. I've got a good memory. It's just really short.
What?
But the comment is the square box is 5 by 5 on the inside. And if it's a 5 by 5 on the inside, and I got 1-inch graduations all the way up. So the box measuring thing, I think, goes up to about 300 cubic inches. So this is a pretty big urn. And the plastic pellets are relatively cheap. I think they cost me like $10. The plywood was scrap in the shop, and I had a scrap piece of Lexan. And yeah, and it just sits there in a corner, and I use it. And the pellets never get wet, even if they get wet, it doesn't hurt them. They don't start to grow. Like I was thinking of using rice, but I was worried about humidity, and the rice might start to grow. Anyway, that's what I had for urns.
Very good.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
I'm learning something. I didn't realize that if I, as co-host, go to gallery, I kill the spotlight.
I guess you do. Well, there's a spotlight on Bert now, which if you look up in the upper left, you can see it says remove spotlight.
Yeah, when you're in gallery view, the spotlighted person shows up with the green border.
Yeah, well, right now yeah, there you've removed the spotlight. Now we are evidently in speaker view, and I'm going to go to gallery. This is all.
Thank you for that tip, Bert. I missed that.
It's handy. It took me a while to figure that out too. So it's when whoever's speaking ends up with a green border, and as soon as you spotlight them, the green border stays on that person. So in gallery view, you just look for the green border. You can tell who you got spotlighted. It's easy to unspotlight them.
Yeah, well, you're green. You have the green border on account of being the speaker there. I'm in gallery view. It'll be on the recording.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else on the urns discussion? Anybody, I see any more waving hands?
Angelo had a question.
Yeah, I have a question.
Who's that?
Angelo here.
Hello, Angelo.
Hi, John. I see these urns that are being made, and my question is, how do you size the urn to fit in a funerary crypt and still maintain the volume that you need for, say, a 200-pound person?
We had the dimensions last week of what the crypts are. We had Mike Peace pulled them up from the VA site, the dimensions of the crypts that are used in the military cemeteries. That's one part of the equation. Does that help you? I can find that. I can send you that link.
I have a double crypt, and it's 11 by 11 by 16 inches. So how do you make are you making these vases to fit in a crypt, or are these freeform?
Some are making them to fit in the crypt, and some are not, is what it amounts to, I think.
I see.
That sounds like maybe something you better check before you make it for some particular individual.
I did check one time, and they said as long as you stay inside 12 by 12 by 12, it'll be no problem. Some of them are like 16 inches or 18 inches. But I just did a quick calculation, 12 by 12 by 12, that equals 1,728 cubic inches. So anything less than 12 by 12 by 12 will fit in one of them funerary crypt or whatever, the little cubicles. And that's more than enough to hold a pretty big person.
Is that a Canadian dimension, or is that a North American dimension, or do you know?
I'm not sure. I checked locally, and that's when I made the call, and they just said, you know, they vary. Whoever, I can't remember who I talked to, and they said they do vary, but if you say inside 12 by 12 by 12, it'll fit. And then if you have a specific place, then phone that place, and they'll tell you how big their areas are. But I was just going on the size of how many cubic inches of ashes you need to put in one. So you'd make an urn big enough for the ashes, and it'll definitely fit.
That help you, Angelo?
No.
No. Well, it's a phone call or email the place where you're actually planning on doing it, or a couple of them. Just
well, let's find out what
email.
What is
My
actually,
crypt is 11 by 11 by 16 inches, so I can't make anything bigger than 11 inches cubed.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, so like I said, they're all different, but
well, that ought to be enough for you anyhow.
Yeah, Angelo, is the 11 inches by 11 inches the 16 inches the height, or is that a width?
The height, the depth, and the length of the crypt is 16 inches. It's fit two people. So
Okay.
my problem is to get 200 cubic inches in a circular turned vase that'll fit in an 11-inch tall opening with enough room to spare so that people can get it in and out. I can show you the sketches at some other time, but I don't know. I'm not real confident about the fit.
Okay, I'll do some calculations and let you know.
Okay, I'm going to have to move it along. Anybody else on this discussion before we go to a different topic? Barry, you on this discussion?
So while I was listening here, I Googled urn calculation for human remains cremated. And there's a website that actually has a little spreadsheet. You put in the person's weight and it tells you how many cups and how many cubic inches of volume would be required. And this particular website is mainlyurns.com, where Maine is spelled like the state of Maine, MAINELYURNS. And it's very straightforward. You just put the person's weight in.
Okay.
John, if the crypt is 11 by 11 by 16 and two people go in there, you got to make the thing fit in 11 by 11 by 8, right?
Yeah, and the answer is that if you have a 11 by 11 by, if you have an 8-inch diameter vessel with a half-inch half-inch sidewall, which means it's 7-inch inside diameter, the inside has, that's a 38 square inches. So like 10 inches tall is like 380 pounds. So an 8-inch diameter vessel by 10 inches tall should have more than enough space. It's just a matter of how much you shape it, Angelo. So
Well, if the hole you're going to put it in is 11 by 11 by 8,
yeah,
make it fit that.
No, I meant the shape of the vessel.
Yeah,
if you want
yeah.
a fancy shape. That's a perfect cylinder.
Well, Michael's got something he's trying to show us. So
Yeah, I don't. I'll scan this and send it to you. But this is how I started out doing this sketch. And I have a calculation. This was 8.5 inches internal height. So it was about 7 inches internally at the widest point. And if I added an inch to the height, that added 20 cubic inches. So it's really, you could, if you got more into a rounded, you can increase the volume substantially, but it's very easy to do.
I'll send that out. If you send it to me, I'll send it out.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Let's get back to gallery view and and see who else is anybody else in this discussion. Any more to say here, or should we go to the next topic?
On a lighter note, this conversation sounds like how tall should you make wine stoppers so that they still fit in the refrigerator shelf?
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit to everybody's individual situation and where the urn is going to go. That's for sure. Yeah. Okay, let's move on. From last week, we had several holdovers, and I see Jerry Snelson up there at the top of the queue, but even ahead of that, we had Don Smith, and we've been practicing sharing screen. So, Don, I'm going to go to you.
Last week, we were talking about the skew.
Yeah.
For those beginners, there is one thing I should have mentioned, because it's something that doesn't register sometimes, and that is to make certain that your rest has no nicks in it. Because that is important, because when you're using a skew, there's nothing worse than hitting a nick in the rest when you're running your skew along.
Well, that's the reason why you would take that sharp corner off the skew.
That's right.
And file the rest with a mill file, a draw filing action.
Yeah, that's what I said. But people who don't do that
Yeah.
Make certain also you haven't got any nicks in your rest.
But oval, wouldn't an oval help also not catch as quick?
Sorry?
Wouldn't an oval skew shape not catch as quick either as a flat one?
No, an oval one is ideal for making certain you roll over your rest very nicely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And one,
We'll play with
Yep.
Cher again before the next group, Don. We'll
Yeah.
get it. And I'm going to go to Jerry
I'll
Snelson.
talk to my team man as well.
Okay. Jerry, what do you got today? What do you have? Jerry knows.
I'd like to share a screen.
Yep.
Can you see that?
We can.
It's a very simple project. It should look familiar to you, John, from the base up because it's pirated from your work, and then the bottom is me. It's made from one plank that was 7/8 or 15/16 by about 10 by 30, and every part of it is laminated.
And this is a wig stand. Did you make a group of these for charity, or did you make it?
No, I've just made this one, and it has been. My cousin is recently retired cancer nurse, and she knew of a young girl who would like it, so she's giving it to her.
I will also say about these wig stands is I have a lot of cowboy hats, and I use wig stands for Australian bush hats and big hats with a brim. It keeps them nice.
And Jerry, what is your inlay on the base? This is Alan.
That's not really inlay. That's just there's a circle of black paint, acrylic, and then lacquer sprayed over that, and then Joe Sanja's iridescent paints that are put on a blob at a time with a stick, and then blown around with a airbrush that has no paint in it.
Well, how do
And
you
then
keep it? How do you keep it confined to that circle and not get it all over the wood? Then
You just blow it right back on.
Huh.
If it goes out over, and it does, you just change the aim of your airbrush and just push it back on with air. And you can also wipe it off with a tissue while it's still wet.
very cool.
But
You have your wood finished before you do this.
yes, yeah, the last stage is putting that finish, that decoration on, and then spraying it with more deft. And this one I put a clear acrylic on in case it would get wet, though I doubt that it would.
Okay.
So
Do you have more of those to show?
no, that's all I wanted to show.
Okay.
Is there a reason why the top is recessed?
Yeah, that's you can put pins or earrings or whatever, and the bottom is recessed too. But it's also, that's how I held it on the lathe.
But I think that anyone I've known who's used these has found the recess to be very very useful. Hairpins, jewelry,
Yeah.
earrings, everything else. It all comes on. It goes on and off along with the wig.
Right.
You talk about holding it on the lathe. I have a chuck that's got the pin jaws, and a 1-inch hole. The pin jaws will go inside of that, so your tenon on the bottom has a hole there, and so that's how I hold them on.
I do the same.
I did the same.
I'm going to go back to gallery. Okay. Before we go, I'm going to jump the queue a little bit to Barry. The reason I'm going to do that is Barry and I made a video last week, and I'd like to show you that video. Is it okay with you, Barry? I've got it right here.
Go ahead.
Okay, anything you want to say before I bring it up?
The only thing is, in the video, I do mention that there is a dog, a block on the underside to position it. I have modified that dog so that the carriage, well, you'll see it, but the carriage can be slid on to the bandsaw table while it is sawing. It'll become obvious when you're watching it, I think.
Okay, I want to share the screen, which is to this video here. Barry Price demonstrates a circle cutting jig that fits on his Bandsaw Resaw Jig Sled for woodturners. On the left you can see Barry Price's Resaw Jig for the bandsaw for resawing logs and crotches into turning sections. And on the right is a new base plate to go onto the sled for cutting circles on the bandsaw that we're going to demo for you today. But first, let's review how the Resaw Jig works.
You pull the tray in until more or less it's flush with the back, and there's a dog down below. What do you call the table pin that comes with bandsaws?
Yeah, it's table pin.
To align the two halves of the table. It's positioned front to rear so that the front of the tooth is lined up with the center of this pivot pin, so you're always cutting right at the tangency.
Got it.
And you can adjust for whatever radius you're, by sliding this out to the indicated radius, locking it down, and your piece will pivot, which we'll demonstrate in a second.
God for wood.
Okay, back to gallery view. Comments on Barry's video?
Barry, I have to build myself one of those. By the way, the bandsaw in my book is the quickest chance to hurt yourself in a shop. I swear it could cut your arm off so quick you wouldn't even know it. Have you been cautious of that, or is there any protection against? I mean, like when you're swinging that around, you got a foot of teeth coming at you.
Was it, I'm sorry, your voice isn't coming in very clear for me. Was there a question there, Jim?
Yeah, the question was, how do you protect yourself while you're using that? I love your device. I'm going to build myself one because it's always a problem trying to get a circle right. And that's a slick way of doing it. But by the same token, I guess the question is, how do we maintain bandsaw safety? I worry more about bandsaw safety than I do table saw. And they don't make any stop saws for bandsaws.
I'm not really sure what aspect of bandsaw safety you're speaking about. In fact, I had a discussion with John when he was here that I had at one point taken the blade guard off the upper guide because it was just the way Grizzly manufactured it. It was binding and pushing the blade guard back against the upper wheel. And so I took it off, and I was cutting probably only about a 4-inch thick piece of wood, and I had leaned forward to get more directly over the cut. And fortunately, I also have a little LED light, magnetic light up there, and my forehead hit the magnetic light. And I realized my forehead was only about an inch away from the blade, so I could have had a nasty gash on my forehead had it not been for that light. So I modified the upper guard so it goes up and down smoothly. I've only ever cut my hand once on a bandsaw, and it wasn't terribly deep. That's not much of an endorsement, I guess, but I guess I'm a bit more reckless around tools than most people. I do wear glasses. I wear hearing protection. And I more often get a small burn on my hand by reaching in behind to get scrap rather than across the teeth to manipulate something. So,
Barry, I was going to ask.
Know, what kind of bandsaw safety you recommend, Jim?
Well, does yours have a brake on it? I have a rule that I will not reach anywhere into the table while the blade is going, whatever machine it is. And you reached into yours pretty quick. I couldn't tell on the video. So I assume you have a brake that stops it almost immediately.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't tell precisely what you're saying.
I'm sorry, is my audio not good?
Barry's hearing isn't either, so let me take that. I think there is a brake on Barry's bandsaw. And I think you're right, Jim, to let the bandsaw coast before you reach in there. I, too, have only had one bad injury in my woodworking 50, 60 years, and that is on the bandsaw. I sawed into the back of my hand in 2014. And I remember in school I was taught that if you saw the tendons in your hand or chisel them, you were going to lose your hand. I mean, you're going to lose, they can't repair that. Well, that's not true anymore, fortunately. I was very lucky. A local orthopedic guy sewed my tendons back together, and it works as good as new. But at the time, I didn't know that was going to happen. I was afraid I had actually permanently damaged my left hand by sawing it on the bandsaw. So I agree, the bandsaw it seems benign, but it's not. It can be very dangerous.
I use a push stick. I use a push stick all around the thing. In fact, my push stick is actually a turned push stick. It hangs in a holster next to there.
You might show it to us one time.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
By the way, I bought that bandsaw The other two I was considering did both have foot brakes. And I just assumed this one had a foot brake. And I was surprised when I received it that it didn't, but it was not, it wasn't worth the effort of reboxing it and sending it back. But I wish it did have a foot pedal brake.
You wouldn't you wouldn't consider making one and adding it?
Yeah, I guess I could do it bear against the blade on the lower wheel.
Yeah, on the rim of the wheel or something. It would be within your mechanical abilities. That's
Hey,
yeah, like caliper type, I guess could work.
Barry, I wasn't indicating you were doing it badly. I just, as you rounded the corners on that, I thought, boy, it's that last, when they cut through the last quarter inch that it slips and spins, and boy, that can, when it can catch your fingers.
That's all.
Hi, I used to be a meat cutter at Weiss Markets, and it's all about speed and cutting meat, and it will take fingers off quickly. I didn't know of anybody have that happen, but general rule for me is don't use the bandsaw when you're tired, or don't try to hurry. Just two things you absolutely cannot do, and never have your fingers in front of the blade as you're pushing it.
That's the reflex you have to have, is your fingers are never in line with the blade, ever. And Kenny's also absolutely right. When I sawed my hand, it was after dinner, and I had at least one glass of wine, and it was stupid of me to be down in the shop.
Well, that reminds me of a thought I nearly always have when I go to the bandsaw is, yeah, right, they use these things to saw meat and bones, and I don't think I want to get near that blade. And so I don't. Even, I mean, the moving blade is going to be dangerous, so just stay away from it. But the other thing with a bandsaw, when you push your piece in, it cuts. When you don't push, it doesn't cut. A table saw is going to throw a piece back at you much more quickly than a bandsaw will.
Yes, that's also true. That's why I don't have one, among other reasons.
I have a question. If anybody had the experience now they're on bandsaws with a blade breaking on them, I always tell people in my shop, do not stand directly across from it unless you want your gut taken out by the blade if it breaks. Is that true? Has anybody experienced that?
I was going to say something on that. Yes, very much so. In fact, that's why you lower the guard to almost a minimal amount. So it's right down there. But the other thing, that blade can come right out of the machine. And I've seen that happen up at the college up here. That blade can come right out. And usually, as you're cutting, it'll start to thump. And when you hear that thump, just get back, because it's going to come out of there.
And usually Rita's using it.
And usually my wife's using it when it starts thumping, so I have no problem with it. But anyway.
So she breaks your bandsaw blades, huh?
That's right. No,
I think what people are saying here is something that we all sort of take for granted, but every single machine we use in the shop has a potential of major injury, and safety first. Eyes on task, mind on task. Make sure you're not putting your way you're out of the way of out of the way of pieces flying around. So that whole safety is a matter of, as you said, John, of when you go into the shop or when you're doing something, to go through that list in your mind to make sure, be it a bandsaw, lathe, or table saw, chop saw, that you've got everything covered.
I like a checklist approach of sort of meticulously going, from one, start with the machine, start with the surroundings, go to the workpiece, go to me. And where I've learned painfully to stop is at me. If I'm tired, if I've had a drink, if it's after dinner, no machines. Just don't.
Yeah.
The thing that the most important thing here is something that'll help us as woodworkers. At least it did me. I'm a Lancaster County boy from up near the Berks County line, and I knew how to schussel. You know what schussel is? And I schusseled too much in the shop. So as I've gotten older, I learned to go slow. It cuts better while you're slow, whether it's the joiner, the table saw, or the bandsaw. Don't schussel your way through the cut. Just let it do its job.
That's a good reflex for anybody.
And the other
for me, I think the two biggest causes of injury on any kind of power equipment is, first of all, repetition. If you do making 100 of something, you get very slack and get closer and closer to the blade or abrasive, whatever you're using. And the other thing is distractions. If you're talking to somebody in the shop and carrying on a conversation, you can easily, your muscle memory kind of goes off to the side and you wind up reaching across the blade, or that's kind of been the cause of most of my hand injuries. And I've had many.
Barry, I'm with you. The second rule I have around machines is do not look ahead to the fence. Keep your focus on the cutting edge. I know there's times you want to, but as soon as you lift up your eyes, you don't know where your fingers are.
The other part that people haven't said about bandsaw blade breaking is that new bandsaw blades, you always stand back to start, but they are generally pretty dull by the time they're going to get to the point of breaking. And it's always, my grandfather always said that you rarely cut yourself on a sharp tool. It's always a dull tool because you're pushing too hard, you're whatever. And so if you find yourself putting too much push into a tool, then it means it's time to sharpen it. Back off.
The other thing that Barry and I experienced making the video is leaving the resaw blade on and then trying to cut a circle. The blade didn't.
Absolutely.
Came off the wheels because you're putting a stress on it that it wasn't ever meant to carry. So that's the other thing, is change the blade. And it doesn't take very long with a little bit of practice.
Also, the bandsaw is a very universal piece of equipment. You show a flat cut, that table could be done at an angle. You can do all kinds of things with a bandsaw. When you start getting into other situations, pay attention to where the blade's going in and coming out and everything else. The bandsaw will do all kinds of things.
Jim, I wonder if taking that another step, use Barry's jig and tilt the table saw 20 degrees or whatever. It'll take more of the bottom of that off. You won't need to use a chisel for it, huh?
You can taper it at 45 if you want. I've done it. It works great. But it also is deceiving is where the blade's going in and coming out sometimes.
I'm going to move it along. I think we're getting a little circular here, because I've got people in queue who've been waving their arms for a while. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go to
I think one further thing on the bandsaw thing is I have students in my shop. I will never let anybody help me with a bandsaw cut. Never let anybody turn off or on the machine for you, because they're all plots for disaster.
And if they're going to be an off bearer, you have to teach them how to do that too. They can't not pull the piece. All they can do is support it. So, okay, I'm going to switch gears here, and we got a few minutes left, and I see Kathy Gower, who we haven't heard from for a while, so I'd love to hear from Kathy. So, Kathy, you want to go for it? We see you.
Okay, time marches on, and I have done another clock.
Wow.
I can't.
Hold it closer to your face. Hold it beside your face. Then it's in the same plane as your face, and the camera has a chance to focus on it.
I think the background, the fake
go.
background is causing a problem.
It's your blur background is what's killing you. We're seeing it though.
Okay.
And that's on a base. So it's what is that, like a pocket watch or a little clock? What is it?
Yeah, it's a 2.5-inch clock. It's just a little decorative desk clock.
And how did you work out those spindles? Did you draw them out, or you made them by eye on the lathe?
I just did it by eye.
Okay.
I was just playing with it.
Well, hold it up. Let's have a look at it, because I think you've got a pretty good eye. And I'd like to see the whole spindle. Lift it up a bit. There you go. Right.
Let's see if I put it in front of my face.
That's it. That's it.
Very nice.
You notice what she did there, without even thinking about it. She's divided that spindle into quarters. There's a top quarter, there's a middle half, and there's a bottom quarter. And it's small whole numbers that make up classical proportions.
Kathy, if you make a little smaller, you can make earrings out of watches, clocks hanging in either ear.
Okay.
So how did you mount the
Keep that in
clock?
mind.
Kathy, how did you mount the clock? I mean, is it made to fit in a groove like that or?
Yes, I just turned tenons on the top and on the bottom, on the spindle and on the spinel.
No, he means
And
what's holding the clock in there?
Talking about the clock fitting into the
it's
groove.
rubber. It's in there pretty good.
Rubber grommet.
Yes.
All right.
So you have to pry it out of there to set it, right?
Yes.
Very
Which
cool.
it goes in and out pretty easy.
Could you send me the spec for that clock so we can tell people where they can get that little clock? Because I want to make one of these now that I've seen it.
Well, that's the thing. The jewelry store that I told you about that the girl gave me the lids for the boxes, she also gave me these little clocks that had been in the store for years and years and years. They were in little crystal cases. So I just took them out of the crystal case and turned a wooden one.
All right. Well, that's a lovely, lovely.
Great
piece.
idea.
Yeah.
Thank
Very
you.
nice piece. Okay, let's take.
There is a on the internet.
Get them on Amazon.
Find it where you can find all kinds of clocks called Clock It.
Send me that, will you, Randy, and I'll put it in the follow-up.
Okay.
Okay. We only got a few minutes left, and I see some guys who regularly share up here, but we haven't heard from Garold Garrett in a long time. So I see Garold's got his hand up. I'm going to go to Garold if that's okay with you guys. What would you like to show us, Garold?
I was just going to elaborate on Mike's presentation at the LAW meeting recently, and he was doing these bowls. I modified the design slightly. His curved all the way down to the base. It had a rounded bottom on it. And what I did was put a flat bottom on mine. And I did this, you can see, a while ago. But I made a number of these. And this comment will be directed to Barry, because Barry commented, how did he separate his pieces from the waste block? And I did use a paper joint. I took that same step and modified it a little more and made an Art Deco
Hold it closer to your face. Back. Don't hold it so close to the camera. Get it back to where your face is, beside your head.
All right.
There you go. Now we can see the whole thing.
Here's an entire piece, the sides, and this is all turned. And again, I held it with the recess in the bottom. I took it another step and changed the top.
Now this is all that technique of two bowls facing a waste block, right? So you can do multi-axis turning.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So just another modification. So you can take Mike's idea and make a lot of different combinations or different ideas with it. And here I have 8-sided done the same way.
Very nice.
And I could never figure out how he did the 5-sided bowl, the star-shaped bowl. And I really like that idea. So I'll have to try that one next.
Okay.
That's it.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go back to a gallery view here, because we're almost right up on the hour. So if anybody's dying to show us a couple of pictures, we got a couple of minutes for that. Anybody else in our last couple of minutes who wants to jump in here with something?
John, just a comment on the slideshow for screen sharing. I noticed people are trying to start a slideshow and then try and make it run. What I found for me was a simpler solution. If I'll do a share screen and show you what I mean, is I open up one picture and then you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to cycle through all the pictures that are there. You don't have to start a slideshow, and that's worked for me, but I don't know if that's, if I'm explaining it right.
You are explaining it right, and that's a concept we've been trying to get across. That will often work. We're finding PCs and Macs do not behave the same. Older PCs and older Macs do not behave the same either. It's just that's the environment we're in. But you're right, Bert. That is the way to do it. Get a picture up, and then the arrow keys on the keyboard will let you do it. Here comes Bert.
What program are you using for your
I'm
photos?
just, on my photos, I just went to File Explorer. Just open it up in Explorer, open up the folder that the pictures were in, and then I open one picture. And then now, like there, I've got that one picture open. I can just hit my arrow key, or up on the side here, it should open. There's a little arrow on the side of the screen, and you click it, and it just clicks through all of the pictures that are in that particular folder. And you go to the other side of the screen, and you just click it back.
I agree.
So you have total control.
However, what I have found is people need to practice that before they'll get it. And
That's right, absolutely. Yeah, it took me a long time to learn it too. I stumbled until I found that little caret on the side of the screen. And then I realized, well, that's so slick because I don't have to rely on software. I can just click it when I want it.
The trick is that you don't see that caret till you put your mouse over it. That's what I had to learn.
Can I add one thing? I can see mine all the time. So that's, but that might be the difference between different machines. So.
Can I add one basic thing is to create a new folder. If you're going to do a presentation like this, separate the photos that you want to use into a small folder, like just create a folder name, and then you won't have trouble with finding the images that you want to show. Yeah. And yes, you have to open an image to start it.
Yeah, that's excellent point. That's exactly what I did. I copy the pictures that I want to show into a folder, and that's the only folder I share, and it's just click, click, click. So even if you go too far, you're not showing off somebody's picture that you don't want to show.
Well, on that note, I would like it, I asked in the email if you could, I'd like to see more pictures of people's toolboxes and tool storage and lathe setups. We will have Steve Lohr as a guest next week, but for the week after that, it would be great to see additional slideshows of your shop setups and how you store tools and what works best for you. I put my butt out here on the line with my setup a couple of weeks ago, and I'm now inviting everybody else to do the same. The other thing about screen share is I come on this call 20 minutes before the hour, and I can come on a half an hour early and practice screen share with anybody who's on here who would like to. And if it's something you would like to practice, all you have to do is join us early, and we can rehearse screen sharing and fool around with it and try and get it right. And as we've done with Dawn, we'll go into our third round of practice next week. It's sometimes difficult to get sorted out, but I have infinite patience. And so the computer requires infinite patience some of the time, just like woodturning does. And I'm going to wrap up now because it's 5 after the hour, if that's okay with everybody. If there's anybody with a burning desire, now's your chance to jump in. Otherwise, please hold it for next week, and we'll see you then. Oh, Vasco's right there with something. He's desperate. Let's see what he's got. What do you got, Vasco?
I just did a quick pen with the printed circuit boards. A little trick I found that I could share with you. Because this is a press fit on this end, it cracks a lot. So if you get the metal and you grind it down with your sander, it fits in a lot nicer and it still stays forever. So just a quick tip.
I'd like to hear more about that sometime. I'm afraid this probably isn't the best moment, so since we are past the hour, and since we are past the hour, and since most of you are still here, I'll say a word about that as well. There's been some call for why don't we do this for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever, and I've thought about it a bunch, and while we could, it seems to me that we are doing pretty well at having a very vigorous and brisk hour every week. And it seems to me if we attenuate that by stretching it out, it'll get less brisk and we'll get more windbags, and we are all given to that. So I think for now I prefer that we stay at an hour and hold it to the hour. And as you know, we like to start on time and we like to end on time, so you can get on with your day and I can get on with mine. And on that note, this is the end of Woodturners Coffee Hour number 89, and I hope to see you all next week.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.